We're partnering with NoCD to raise awareness about OCD. OCD is more than what you see on TV and in the movies. Imagine having unwanted thoughts about your relationship stuck in your head all day, no matter how hard you try to make them go away. That's relationship OCD. It comes with unrelenting, intrusive images, thoughts, and urges about your partner or loved one. Breaking the OCD cycle takes effective treatment. Go to nocd.com to get evidence-based treatment.
I want to build a community around any topic. I can do it. And it's mostly through storytelling. People resonate with stories. When they hear you telling a story, they want to tell their own story. It makes them think of their own story and their own journey.
Hi, I'm Erin, licensed clinical mental health counselor and OCD specialist. I'm also a wife, mom to 3, and small business owner, helping those who are spiraling from intrusive thoughts to come out of that valley with long-term recovery and self-awareness. Reheat your coffee and pop in your AirPods to learn how to boss up to OCD. Today on the Bossing Up Overcoming OCD podcast, I've got a very special guest. Her name is Jennifer Henczel, and she is a host of the Women in Podcasting show, and she's also running a contest. And so, Jen, would you mind to introduce yourself to the listeners?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Erin. So my name is Jennifer Henczel, and I'm a podcaster, author, founder of the Women in Podcasting Network and Inspiring Innovators Club. And I have 2 podcasts, the Women in Podcasting Show and the Inspiring Innovators Show. And I won a number of awards. Most recently, I won the Innovator of the Year Award from Quill Awards. And now my network, the Women in Podcasting Network, is having its own type of awards for women podcasters. And our mission is to elevate women's voices globally and throughout the podcasting industry. So thank you so much for having me.
Yes, you're very welcome. Well, and I'm so excited that we got connected and that we're having this opportunity to talk today because I did nominate myself for your contest. Is this the first time you've ran this contest, or have you done it multiple times?
Yeah, so this is the first year. And
Awesome.
we've have almost 400 nominees. And so far we're on day 4 of voting, I think. Is it? Do a few days now, and there's over 8,000 votes already.
Wow.
For the nominees. So that's exciting. So it's our first year, and definitely a lot of people have said they're going to come back and participate again next year. We're going to have it earlier next year in the spring instead of through the summer.
Right, right. Well, I really appreciate that opportunity as well because it's great exposure for any podcaster out there because you've got the different categories going on. So even though my podcast is in the mental health category, I mean, it looked like there were probably 20 other categories. So that helps kind of separate you so you're not comparing apples to oranges, like you're in your
Yes,
own
exactly.
section.
Exactly. Yeah, we wanted to make it more of a community event, a community experience where the podcasters connected with each other and engaged their listeners and rallied their listeners. So I'm all about building a community around your message. And so that was really an important, aspect of it for me. So it's not a judged contest. It's more about where people will get their listeners excited to vote for their podcast. And then the most votes will win in that category.
Awesome. Awesome. So, Jen, how did you get started in podcasting? And on top of that, what inspired you to empower women with podcasting?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, for a long, long time, my business was a side gig on the side of a full-time job that I had. And then I was constantly trying to turn it into my full-time income. And so it just seemed like success was always around the next corner. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And
Yes.
then, so I was just always stuck in working full time and having my business on the side and trying to turn it into my full-time income so I could stop my full-time job. And then finally in 2012, I was able to break free and turn my side gig into my full-time business. And I haven't worked for anyone since. So that's been
Wow.
12 years now. So a big part of that was learning how to build thriving communities around my message and how to leverage my message and expertise to generate reoccurring monthly income. And so now I help other people do the same. And, I'd love to share some tips with you about that if you like, and just the mental health aspects of that.
Right, absolutely. Because one of the things I noticed, there's not a lot of therapists out there that do a podcast. And I was only 3 episodes in once I got my first sponsor, which I feel very fortunate and blessed to have that. The sponsor is No CD, which is a big company for OCD treatment. So it really aligns with my mission and my goals. But yeah, I'm very much interested to hear how you are able to turn that side hustle into your full-time gig.
Yeah, so my journey actually started when I was at work. I was at my 9 to 5, and I got a phone call that no one wants to receive. It was my
Hmm.
husband's boss, and he said my husband was in a terrible accident and I had to come to the hospital right away. And it
Oh
turned out
no.
he was crushed by 12,000 pounds of wood at work. And all the way to the hospital, I thought to myself, I'm not going to lose my best friend today. It was terrible. And actually, timely topic is that it was the Olympics were going on in Vancouver.
Oh,
And it was between the Olympic flame was coming through, and it was between me and getting to the hospital. And it was so I had to wait for the Olympic flame. So I just remember looking up at the Olympic flame going, I've got to get to the hospital. I've got to be with my best friends, my husband, in a bad condition in the hospital. And so when I got to the hospital, I didn't even recognize him, from the accident. But thankfully he survived. It was, a huge tragedy and a long, long, long recovery that's still going on. He was left with multiple injuries.
wow.
And so, but he was so courageous, and it's really made us stronger together. And it really, he defied unimaginable odds, and we both have. So for me, the whole thing really made me look at my life. And I realized I had become isolated and stuck in my job, stuck in my life, stuck behind screens, the whole thing, right?
Hmm.
And so maybe some of your listeners, maybe you love your job and you want to move up in your career, or maybe you feel like, just waiting for what you're wanting in your life is taking so long. But I want to encourage you because, it can happen. So one of the things that impacted me during that time was how the communities my husband was involved in before his accident rallied around him. And so
Ah,
he was a volunteer football coach in the community. And the football players and the other coaches would come around and say, "We're here for you, Coach Paul." And so while the situation really blew up my life, there were moments there that also kind of reignited a spark
hmm.
inside me. And podcasting was a big part of that, listening to podcasts. And so I hadn't started my podcast yet, but I realized the one thing I was missing was that kind of community in the business world,
Yes.
the entrepreneur world. And so so I'm still working full time, but out of my need to connect with people in the entrepreneur world, I invited local business owners to join me for lunch. And I wasn't very organized with it. I just kind of put it out on social, like, hey, do you want to
Hmm.
join me for lunch on this day? And I reserved this little room for us to meet in. And to my surprise, over 50 business owners showed up. And so
Wow.
the little room I had rented, or reserved, was overflowing. And it made me realize that other people were seeking connection also, right?
Yes. And that was back in 2012 or
Yeah.
before.
And so that one meeting turned into a group, and that group turned into a network with multiple chapters throughout my region. And so it became a large business network, and I planned and promoted over 600 events and met so many amazing people. And with the platform that I grew and cultivated, I was even able to help my husband go from an injured mill worker to an international speaker. And so he's done a TED Talk. He done a
Wow.
TED Talk called Silencing Stigma Through Storytelling. And he's also written a book about our story called Crushed Alive. And so,
Oh my goodness.
yeah,
I'm sure
yeah.
that's very powerful.
Yeah, and so I ended up selling that network, and I've built other successful communities, including Women in Podcasting,
Hmm.
Women in Podcasting Network and the Women in Podcasting Awards now. And as a result, I've developed systems and strategies for building communities. And, one of the things that I realized through that whole experience that we all need for our mental health is that, you know, people are there to help you, but you need to show up to be helped.
So true.
And
Especially in
so,
the realm of OCD, because folks are in that silent struggle. And sometimes when they show up for therapy or they're in their therapy session, they're telling me, "Hey, I've never told anyone this before." And it's just very eye-opening for sure that OCD sufferers, they keep a lot inside and not a lot of people know. But yeah, they definitely need to
reach out and build that community. And that's, one of the things I hope for this podcast. And I've got an email list. And so I definitely want to hear more about how you have developed a community around your podcast.
Yeah, so for anything to work, I found out that you need to be part of a community. You need to be part of a community. And sometimes you need to create that circle of support around yourself because it's not going to create itself. You have to go out and take that leap and join a group or create your own group. And people will help you if you show up to be helped, like I was saying. And you need to put yourself in a position of experiencing the value of being part of a supportive community.
Mm-hmm.
Because unless you take that leap, you're just not going to realize the benefits. There's so many benefits to being part of a community. And the myth is that the one who teaches the most, the one who creates the best website, the one who, has the best social content, the one who hustles the most. I was hustling 12, 14, 16 hours a day.
Wow.
Between my job and my part-time business. And the myth that the one who hustles to the point of exhaustion makes the most money and freedom, but it's just not true. The
No.
problem is I was trying to do everything alone.
Mm.
And so hustling alone on your own island won't get you very far, but walking the path and climbing the mountain with like-minded people will make the journey more enjoyable and take you places that you can't even imagine. So because a football community kind of inspired me to start building my own communities, I like to say, drop the hustle and join the huddle.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So
So,
opportunities. Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I just found that opportunities will flow to you, and I had to flip the scripts in my
Mm.
mind. I had to flip the scripts that said, I had to do everything alone. I don't need other people. I have to be polished before I showed up. So I know with OCD, that's a big thing, right?
Right.
It's easy to say, done is better than perfect, but like it's a struggle to do that. And so to just tell yourself it's okay not to be polished. Like nobody's expecting you to be polished. You know,
Yes. And a lot of times, perfectionism shows up in OCD, but then in general, whenever you are even thinking about doing any type of marketing, it can be very easy to get stuck in just the planning phase and never really launching it because you think,
yeah.
oh, I have to have it perfect. I have to have all of my ducks in a row in order to do this. But what's hilarious, whenever I first started my podcast, I did not know how to work my microphone. It was probably about the third or fourth episode that I was like, oh, that's why my audio sounds off. That's why I'm putting in so much time in the editing because I had the wrong settings. So,
Mhm.
sometimes you just got to go for it. And I'm thankful that I did because the podcast is just growing in so many great ways that it's just fabulous to see all the listeners showing up, and I'm getting a lot more responses like with the Q&A that I offer and even with the email engagement that's happening.
We're partnering with NoCD to raise awareness about OCD. OCD is more than what you see on TV and in the movies. Imagine having unwanted thoughts about your relationship stuck in your head all day, no matter how hard you try to make them go away. That's relationship OCD. It comes with unrelenting, intrusive images, thoughts, and urges about your partner or loved one. If you think you may be struggling with relationship OCD, there's hope. NoCD offers effective, affordable, and convenient OCD therapy. NoCD therapists are trained in exposure response prevention therapy, the gold standard treatment for OCD. With NoCD, you can do virtual, live, face-to-face video sessions with one of their licensed specialty trained therapists. It's affordable and they accept most major insurance plans. Breaking the relationship OCD cycle takes effective treatment. To get started with NoCD, go to nocd.com/savage.
Do you have any advice for people who are thinking about starting a podcast or thinking about starting a community and how they can overcome any challenges or hesitations?
Well, you're doing such an excellent job. And,
Thank you.
I'm sure you've received feedback that you've helped people. And that's the thing you don't realize is when we were going through our stuff, podcasts were at the center. Like we would listen to podcasts morning and night. And like you could be putting your message out there and not realize who you're helping. So the
True.
key thing is you need to be you to show up. Like you just need to show up as you with your message, and somebody out there needs it. That's all it
Yes.
takes, is the real you to stand up and let yourself be seen. And you'll find your friends and following when you stand up and you let yourself be seen and you take the leap. You know, when I turned 50, I went skydiving.
Wow.
I had never been skydiving before. And we went up and up and up and up and up and up. And you get to about 5,000 feet. And it's like, wow, this is really high. And then they're like, oh no, we're going to 10,000 feet. Like we kept going and going and going. And I was doing okay. I was doing okay until the door opened and people just started falling out, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's unusual. Most planes I've been on, you know, the door doesn't open and people don't fall out.
Yes.
So I was the last one, and of course I was tethered to someone because it was my first time. And you have to stand out, get out onto the little plane, and you stand out on a little stair, like a little step,
Mm.
and the world is below you. There's nothing below
Wow.
you. And then that's the scariest part, is right before the leap,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then when we fell, it was only for about 3 seconds that it felt like falling and that it was kind of scary. And then it felt like floating and flying.
Wow.
So that's a lot of the things we tackle in life. Like I just want to encourage people, like you said, my sound was terrible when I started podcasting. It
Mm-hmm.
was terrible. But if people just take the leap,
Yes.
it's after that, you know, the fruits will come, the joy, the floating, and the, you know, and then I landed safely. It was all great. Like it was a joyful experience. And it only took that one leap was scary. And then for about 3 seconds, and then it was all joy. And so the podcasting community is such a beautiful community, you know, so it's not just, you're not just alone, and you're not just sitting there, you know, working out your own sound and stuff. You can ask questions, you can connect with other podcasters,
Mm-hmm.
it's a really joyful experience. And just to take the leap, my sound was terrible when I started my podcast. So I can totally relate to what you were saying.
Yes. Well, and you have to start somewhere. And in that start, that's where you really learn. Like
Yeah.
I would not have realized the settings on the microphone had I not started. So in creating the community, have you noticed certain aspects or ways that are more effective than others in building that community? So is it like a membership? Is it a Facebook group? Is it, some sort of website? What are those tips and strategies that you have in building a community?
Well, there is a certain system that I have, and you know, I'd love to gift it to any of your audience if you'd like that.
Okay.
So what happens is, in the beginning, I highly recommend, if you don't have a website or something like that, to put your show notes on and all your links to the different places, Apple and things like that. Then I have something called a quick links page that people can have, and it's free for them to set up. And then
Okay.
they can put all their links in one place, and their cover art of their podcast in one place. And that really helps, because what I find is a lot of podcasters are missing that,
Hmm.
where they have a central place where people can find all the different places to listen to it. So you can put Apple and Spotify links and all, like everything to do with your podcast on one page, right?
Right. Yes. And mine is through Chartable.
Okay, great. Yeah,
Yes.
sure. That's a great option too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's for sure. And then the other thing is to have an email marketing system to
Yes.
collect leads, to be able to connect with your audience, because when they opt in, you're going to be trying to attract your ideal audience. And when they opt in, you offer a gift that they want, like a checklist or a workbook or a guide. And then they will download that and be on your email list, and you can connect with them and get to know them on a deeper level.
Yes.
You can actually get to know them instead of just sort of hoping they see you on social, right? And
Right.
so, yeah. And then you can offer something after that that helps them to be part of your life, part of your world. And so I really love what I call mini memberships. So offering really affordable, $5 or $7 a month, or $17 or $27 a month memberships. And then I have higher tiers also. So higher ticket, higher tiers in my offerings. But those things are the community parts, where I help, people to gather in a community and get to know each other. I have all kinds of perks of connecting them. So we've had
Mm-hmm.
thousands and thousands of connections in the Women in Podcasting group, as far as people, guests connecting with podcasters and people collaborating together and all of that kind of thing.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And so is there a way that you structure your episodes to keep the listeners engaged?
Yeah, so I have solo and interview episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And I normally I work on the title's really important
Okay.
because, the title is really, really important to the search engines and to the podcast platforms. And so you want to say something that addresses your audience or a need that your audience wants and, something that's going to attract them to listen to the episode. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a good tip because with this podcast, I hope that it can spread awareness about OCD because it's very misunderstood. And so
Yeah.
I like the idea of the community, but then I could see where optimizing the title of the episode could reach even more listeners. Now,
That's
do you
right.
see that rating the show and writing a review for shows helps elevate the show on search results?
It does, and we've had lots of connections that way where it's not just, oh, review my podcast and you don't even know it, but people will connect and say, hey, this is my podcast is about this, and all the like-minded people will kind of connect and listen to each other's podcasts and then really offer real feedback, real reviews, and that really helps elevate the podcast in the rankings for sure, and then in the listings. Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. So if there are some other podcasters out there, I mean, that's another great way to help your own podcast because, well, not only are you getting that community and that support for yourself, but then there's this mutual benefit of you're elevating other like-minded people's podcasts. That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so far, I mean, it sounds like with the awards and all the voting, you've got a lot of participation, a lot of people coming to vote for their favorite shows. Have you noticed any other standout moments or stories from celebrating women in podcasting?
Well, it's just such a beautiful community. Collaboration really is at the heart of everything I do and offer, and I want to help people connect. So like I was saying before, in that network I created, I had planned and promoted over 600 events, but those were live in person. Now I'm
Wow.
all online. And so
Yeah.
sometimes we have a get together. There's one coming up I'd love for you to be at. But
Okay.
we're on the Women in Podcasting show, and everybody gets to introduce themselves. And so I'd love to invite everybody to listen to those episodes. There's already lots of them on the Women in Podcasting show where all the women podcasters are introducing themselves. And
Hmm.
so you get to know a whole bunch of podcasts all at once, and then you can
Yes.
listen. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so what kind of words of encouragement do you have for someone who is self-conscious or doesn't have the confidence to start a podcast?
Yeah. Well, like I said, ditch the hustle and join the huddle.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then, some of the other things is one of my favorite quotes is build bridges, not walls.
Oh,
And
that's lovely.
every year on my birthday, I post that. I say, this is my birthday wish. And I've posted that for many, many, many years. Over 10 years, I've posted build bridges, not walls. That's my wish, my birthday wish every year. That's my wish all the time and that's what podcasting does. It builds
Mm-hmm.
connections between people. And another saying that I love is a rising tide lifts all boats, because when we all work together and we're all going to help each other, that is what really, that's what makes life enriching, and it's what gets us through. And it also, when we elevate each other, we're elevating ourselves. And another saying that I love is drop what drains you and do what delights you. Do what fires you up. Talk about what fires you up. And that's going to help to balance and counter the other things that creep up in our minds.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. And so how long have you been doing podcasting now?
So I actually was learning so I was listening to podcasts since about 2007. And then I
Mm-hmm.
started learning how to do a podcast in around that, 2010, 2012, like around that time. And then I didn't actually start a podcast. I was in a podcast group learning for all that time and getting to know and connecting with people. I didn't actually start my podcast until January 2020.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so you put a lot of planning and thought into it before actually launching. Yeah, is
Yeah.
there a certain way or like, I guess, how much time do you spend in planning your episodes? Because I think one of the things that the listeners don't see is all the stuff that comes in an episode. I mean, even though the episode might be 20 minutes, you're not spending 20 minutes for that episode. It's much more than that. So
Yes.
what's your time estimation that you spend on an episode?
Yeah, it really depends if I'm doing my own, solo episodes where I'm really excited and fired up to deliver something. It can be fairly quick. I have a background in curriculum development.
Oh, wow.
So my vocation is as an adult instructor. So I have what's called the Provincial Instructor's Diploma.
Uh-huh.
Provincial Instructor's Diploma in my region is just for instructing adults. And so I mostly taught business and entrepreneurial courses. So that helps me though to create curriculum. And so I'm able to create episodes with I use a structure called Story Teach Tool. And so the story, I usually have some stories, and then I have some teaching points, and then I have a call to action or a wrap up.
Right.
And so that's the format that I follow. And so that by following that, it helps me to not get sidetracked. And then it also helps me to, create value for the listeners.
Right. Right.
Mm.
And listeners really, I mean, anybody resonates with stories so much. Do you keep like a story bank, if you will? Like, do you collect different stories and you think, oh, that would be good for a podcast one day?
Oh, for sure. Yes. Yes. My husband and I love brainstorming together. We love writing stories, creating stories, and, pulling stories out of our life. And our stories really have helped him, like I was saying before, take him from an injured mill worker to an international speaker. It's helped me to build a platform. If I want to build a community around any topic, I can do it. And it's mostly through storytelling. People resonate with stories. When they hear you telling a story, they want to tell their own story. It makes them think of their own story and their own journey.
True. True. Yeah. So in launching your own podcast and having this community, how are you managing the work-life balance? Because sometimes when you are your own boss, it's easy to get caught up in the never-ending to-do list. So how do you keep, your self-care, on track? And yeah, how do you balance all of that?
Yeah, it can be difficult, right? And my question to people would be, what modalities do you have in place right now for your self-care, and which ones do you want to incorporate? And we actually schedule it in, because if we don't schedule it in, it just doesn't happen.
Good
And
point.
yeah, and so we've encompassed a number of modalities that help us with our self-care. So everything from the melt method, which is rolling on a foam roller, for example,
Mm-hmm.
just the fact that we're aware of the modalities and that we know we need to do them and then we schedule them in. So the melt method, affirmations, we love affirmations. So we make sure that we do affirmations every day. We actually became so interested in having modalities for our self-care that we both became practitioners in NLP. And so that helps us with goal planning and all kinds of other, mental health and self-care type of things. So we have lots of different things in place that we do for our self-care.
Awesome. Yeah. And in what ways do you think the podcasting industry is evolving and changing to better support female voices and mental health advocates?
Yeah, I really think that the more we can elevate women's voices, the more we're going to get this kind of information out there and to, just continue supporting each other. I always just, my goal and what I think is going to change the world is when, there's a community built around a podcast, and every community that doesn't have a podcast yet, they will start a podcast and have a podcast at the center of the community. So I think podcasting and community building are going to go hand in hand. From here, I
Mm-hmm.
think you're going to see more and more and more. All the big media companies are still investing heavily in podcasting. So I think it's going to continue. And I think it's going to start to become more and more mainstream and become part of every community is going to have a podcast. And every podcast should strive to build a community around it itself.
Totally agree. I mean, it's the new form of like information consumption. Like we're not really listening to the radio as much anymore. It's podcasts. We're
Yeah,
not, I mean, at least for me, I don't turn on the TV to listen to news. I'm
yeah,
listening to a podcast.
exactly. Exactly.
We're partnering with NoCD to raise awareness about OCD. OCD is more than what you see on TV and in the movies. Imagine having unwanted thoughts about your relationship stuck in your head all day, no matter how hard you try to make them go away. That's relationship OCD. It comes with unrelenting, intrusive images, thoughts, and urges about your partner or loved one. Breaking the OCD cycle takes effective treatment. Go to nocd.com to get evidence-based treatment.
Yeah. And so, Jen, before we wrap up, is there anything the listeners can do to help amplify females and women in the podcasting industry?
Well, if you listen to podcasts and listen to this podcast, give a review to this podcast. This is an excellent podcast, so this is a great place to start. And
Thank
then
you.
also, I have some gifts if you'd like me to offer to your audience. I have two. One is an episode planner, so it helps you
Awesome.
generate ideas for your episode. And you can go to podcastingpack.com for that.
Okay.
And then the other thing for the mental health stuff, if you go to risereachresults.com/Jennifer, and that's I don't usually give that away. That's a $7 a month membership, but I want to give it to your audience and your people because I want them to see the different modalities I've put in place for my mental health, and I want to help them with that.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much. Well, I'll be sure to include those links in the show notes also so the listeners can have access to that.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you again for your time and speaking with me today. Are there any other closing thoughts that you have for the listeners or anything that we haven't covered?
I just thank you so much for having me. I thank you for the work that you're doing, helping so many people. This is an important topic, and you're doing an excellent job with your show. And congratulations on the success you've had so far. And I wish
Thank
you
you.
all the luck and all the, success with your podcast.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jen.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
We're partnering with NoCD to raise awareness about OCD. OCD is more than what you see on TV and in the movies. Imagine having unwanted thoughts about your relationship stuck in your head all day, no matter how hard you try to make them go away. That's relationship OCD. It comes with unrelenting, intrusive images, thoughts, and urges about your partner or loved one. Breaking the OCD cycle takes effective treatment. Go to nocd.com to get evidence-based treatment. Thank you for listening to today's interview that I had with Jen. I hope you found this helpful and inspiring, that no matter where you are in your story and in your life, you can pursue your dreams and build a community around yourself to help support you. And if you're interested in those resources that Jen mentioned, I will have them linked in the show notes, and I'll also link them on my blog on my website at valuedriventherapy.com. So be sure to check out those resources and come back next week where I'm going to be talking about how to set boundaries. Thank you for listening to another episode of Bossing Up, Overcoming OCD. This information is intended to be helpful and not a substitute for professional counseling. If you're struggling with any mental health challenges, I encourage you to seek help from a qualified therapist or healthcare professional. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to rate and review the show. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners, and don't forget to check out the affiliate links in the show notes for hand-picked recommendations that can brighten your day. Your support through these links helps keep the show running and provide valuable content. You're not alone in your journey. Stay strong, stay resilient, and keep bossing up. See you next time.